We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, because they are hard. These words sound familiar to some of you? Spoken by President Kennedy, 1962, Rice University, right? And with these words, President Kennedy sent mankind on the greatest journey of all times, ever. We left the planet and we went and set foot on another celestial body. Can you imagine? But if you think about the words that he used, we choose to go to the moon. Almost sounds whimsical, doesn't it? Like we choose to go to the movies. And I bet if you could ask President Kennedy if he was here today, was it that simple? You just chose to go to the moon? I think in a word he'd say yeah. Now he understood that this mission was fraught with danger and peril, and we'd have to solve many technical problems, right? And we'd have to spend a lot of money. But he had seen the future, and he understood that this mission would coalesce the nation and bring out the best and the brightest. And so we spent that money. And in that year, President Kennedy, in that speech, tripled NASA's budget to $5.4 billion. But as he astutely pointed out, this was still somewhat less than the American people were spending on cigarettes and cigars in a year. So if you want to think about it, we went to the moon on our cigarette budget. Pretty amazing. Right? So we spent the money, but we had to solve these problems too. We had to learn how to weld in a vacuum, lubricate in a vacuum. We had to come up with all kinds of new materials. None the least of these problems we had to solve, though, was education. You see, we had to completely revamp education. In fact, we had to reteach ourselves science. But fortunately for us, or unfortunately, the Russians had put this thing in space only a few years earlier called Sputnik. And you see, at that time, we perceived the Russians as a bunch of farmers. And that shook us to our core. How did these guys beat us to space? And so we packed our bags and we went to Russia. And we took a look around. And what we found shocked us. You see, the Russian kids at that time were going to school 6 days a week, 10 hours a day. I have 3 boys, they would rebel against such an idea. But not only that, the Russian community held up the engineer in the highest esteem. Much like we might hold up the Hollywood movie star or professional athlete today in our country. But we learned these things. We came back, we worked on education, and we went to the moon. But that's not all we did. You see, as a result of going to the moon, we created over 4,000 new consumer products. Everything from the nonstick pan, which is in your house probably today, to the pacemaker, and everything in between. You see, in fact, we propelled an economy for 50 years on our cigarette budget, right? We created new industries, new jobs, new technologies. Unbelievable what we accomplished. But what some of you may not know is that that's not all that happened. We found something on the moon. You see, we brought hundreds of pounds of rocks back from the moon, and in examining them, we found something. We found something so valuable that it is the most valuable thing to us in the universe. In fact, it's been said it's more valuable than gold. If there were gold bricks stacked on the moon, it's been said that it would be too costly to go and get them. The cost to go get them would exceed the value to bring them home. What we found there is more valuable than plutonium, titanium, fossil fuels. You fill in the blank, it's more valuable. It's worth $300 billion a year to our planet. What is it? It's called Helium 3. Now, before I go any further, let me make sure you understand. Helium 3 is not the thing we blow up kids' balloons with at parties. That's Helium 4, and Helium 3 just happens to be missing a neutron. We'll get into that later. But before I tell you what Helium 3 is, let me tell you what it did to me when I found out about it only a few short years ago. The first thing I recognized was how small I am, how little I really understand about this universe I live in, how much I had embraced what maybe many of you have embraced, which I like to call island mentality. This idea that this rock I live on, this piece of dirt I live on, is all there is. I tend to live life this close to the rock. This idea of Helium 3, though, caused me to just suck back and take a bigger look at a bigger picture. And frankly, I began to dream again, to dream like a child, that anything was possible if we put our minds to it we could accomplish anything. We went to the moon on our cigarette budget with not much more than a slide rule and a pocket calculator. Can you imagine? We pulled that off. So what is helium-3? So maybe it'll make more sense. Well, it turns out that helium-3, an isotope of helium, if you take this material and you fuse it with something called deuterium, which we find in water all over the planet, basically heavy hydrogen, you create an unbelievable reaction, an energy reaction, one that is 80% efficient. So let me scale that for you for a minute, 80% efficient. Today on the planet, the best energy reactions we have can yield 40% efficiency. That means that over half of the energy is lost to heat, waste. That's why your car has a radiator in it, right? So it's unbelievably efficient. But it gets better than that. It releases a tremendous amount of energy. How much energy? 1 kilogram of helium-3 gas is the equivalent to 10,000 tons of fossil fuel. I'll say that one more time. That's about 2.5 pounds of gas is the equivalent of 10,000 tons of fossil fuel. Said another way, 25 tons of helium-3 would power the United States electrically for 12 months. 25 tons would fit in any fuel tanker you see going down the road any time of day. Unbelievable. And it gets better. It turns out that this reaction produces no greenhouse gas, virtually no radiation. It's almost a perfect fuel. Why isn't everyone talking about it? Well, this is sort of my point. What else don't we know about? What else aren't we thinking about? Well, there's some problems with helium-3, 2 primarily. 1, we need to solve the nuclear fusion reactor problem. We've been working on it for 3 decades, whether you're aware of it or not, fusing materials. The other problem is that helium-3 doesn't exist on the Earth in any quantity. You see, the sun is a big nuclear fusion reactor, and so it takes hydrogen. Because of its immense size and gravity, it slams this hydrogen together, fuses it, releases energy, and creates helium. So if the sun had a tailpipe, helium would be coming out of it. And about 1 out of every 10,000 of these helium-4 atoms that we use to blow up balloons with is a helium-3 atom, carried in the solar winds throughout the solar system. But because of our magnetic field and our atmosphere, these things go around us. Turns out, though, the moon doesn't have this, doesn't have an atmosphere, doesn't have a magnetic field, and helium-3 is raining on the surface of the moon and has been for the last 4.5 billion years. Estimated 500 million tons of helium-3 exist on the moon, or at least it has rained on the moon over the years. So when you think about this, and you think, well, gosh, Clifton, that sounds almost crazy. How could we do such a thing? Well, I'll remind you again. We went to the moon 50 years ago almost, 40 years ago, on our cigarette budget, slide rule, and a calculator, pocket calculator. I'd suggest to you, in fact, I would bet next month's paycheck, that these 7th grade girls we met today could solve this problem, given the right tools, right investment. Yeah, sure. And we take for granted things that once upon a time were very difficult. You think it was easy to build the Intercontinental Railroad through mountains and so forth? Not at the time we did it. We have solved these problems over the years. We've done it. So if you don't mind, just to raise a hand, who's ever heard of helium-3 as an energy source in the room? A few of you. Of those of you who did not raise your hand, who's ever dreamt about helium-3 as an energy solution? And what's the point? Well, the simple point is we do not dream about the things we do not know about. If we are unaware, then we do not dream. So let me take you on a brief tangent. Recently, I had an opportunity to participate in a program called Teach for America. Some of you may be familiar with it. And among other things, Teach for America puts community leaders in schools and allows us to interact with school kids for a day, an hour in my case. So I had this opportunity last year, and I went and did it. And the class was discussing coal mining when I got there. And they were debating, you know, the pros and cons of coal mining, problems with the environment, but it created jobs and so forth. And I said to them, and I thought to myself, you know, you really can't debate coal mining. We're sort of stuck with it. You see, coal still provides about 3/4 of our nation's electricity, and it is still the cheapest form of electricity on the planet. Maybe your time would be better served thinking about what's next. And then it occurred to me on a broader scale that perhaps we are teaching our kids about our past and not their future. Do you think coal mining is going to get those kids dreaming? Or maybe Helium 3 might get them dreaming, but I'm sure coal mining is not going to do it. Some sobering statistics for us to consider. Today, we are 43rd out of 44 developed countries in terms of innovation, almost dead last. Our kids are 17th in science and 25th in math. Right now, we have over 4 million unfilled jobs in this country, and yet we are suffering with persistent and chronic high unemployment. How can this be? And I suggest to you, the primary reason is that we have a skills gap. We have more student loan debt in the United States right now than we have credit card debt. Now, you know how much we like our credit cards, and we have more student loan debt, which might suggest a couple of things. One, perhaps we have pushed too many of our kids down the wrong educational path. In fact, the Labor Department recently released a report that suggests that 80% of our kids do not require a 4-year degree to be successful. Unbelievable, 80%. I would also suggest that perhaps we in the community have not done a good enough job creating opportunities for our kids, making long-term investments that will bring new jobs and new opportunities, much like maybe Mr. Kennedy did back in the 60s. So, what can we do? Well, let me speak to you just a minute as an employer. And I run a small business here in Charlotte. It's a technical business. And I can tell you that we're looking for bright minds like many companies. But we're in a skills-driven economy today. We don't care what you know, we care what you can do. We have to give kids the opportunity to get experiential learning, to put their hands on the stuff early. You've heard a lot about that today. What do Tiger Woods and Eddie Van Halen have in common? They started early. They picked it up early. And arguably, both of them revolutionized the businesses in which they were in. We got to give kids that chance. We got to make sure they're aware of what the possibilities are. We got to make sure teachers are aware of what the possibilities are. Or we're going to struggle to get them motivated, right? That's absolutely key. So what do we do? Well, first thing I think we got to do is we got to roll up our sleeves. It's been said, there's enough talk. It's time to do something. And arguably, you might think we don't have this coalescing issue anymore in our country like we did in the 60s. We're all going to the moon. 400,000 people were involved in that process. But you'd be wrong. You see, we have something that should be motivating all of us, and it's what I'll refer to as a human resource cliff. You see, it's estimated by the year 2020, there'll be over 800 million unfilled jobs around the planet. Now, simply put, this looks like one of two things, depending on which side of the ledger you're looking at. Either it looks like a real big problem or a real big opportunity. And we have to make a decision, not 3 years from now, not 5 years from now. We got to make a decision right now. Which side of the ledger are we going to be on? Which side? Is it going to be a problem, or is it going to be an opportunity of all opportunities? And maybe it's time for us, as President Kennedy did, to choose a different path, to choose a new direction, to choose a future for our kids and for ourselves. It's not fraught with mountains of debt, global warming, lack of opportunity, you fill in the blank. That we in this room right now choose to revamp education. Not for the purpose of moon missions, but for the purpose of meeting the demands of this human resource cliff that we are facing. It's absolutely critical that we choose to do it now, that we choose to do it not because it's easy, because it is hard. But no matter what we choose to do, as we leave here today, we must choose to dream again. We as parents, we as teachers, we as business leaders, we in the community. It's our responsibility today. Education is not someone else's responsibility. It is the responsibility of the community. All of us are responsible for what's happening or not happening. So tonight, this evening, I present a call to arms. What will we do? You ready to roll up your sleeves? Because these kids, these educators, they need our help. And now it's time. It's time to start dreaming again, because everything we want to be, everywhere we want to go, everything we want to do starts with a dream. If you can't dream it, you can't do it. I'll leave you with this quote, and it comes from Mark Twain. And it goes something like this. 20 years from now, you will be more disappointed in the things that you didn't do than the things that you did. So sail away from safe harbor. Let the trade winds fill your sails. Explore, dream, discover. Thank you.